Alright, had a banger 16-minute video about a broad MTG topic that gained subscribers? Now, time to talk about a tournament run. It's Canadian Highlander. Now that's more like it. I brought a Winota pile to a tournament in 2026, not clickbait. So, I was mulling over what deck to bring to the latest Joking tournament for a bit. If you haven't seen my video from a little over a year ago, Joking 101 is a community member that has put on a tournament in the past, and this year is running monthly tournaments, each proxy-friendly $250 prize pools and $15 entry. At the end of this year, there will be a Tournament of Champions event that I will probably not be at, that will be available to top placing players from Joking Opens or the most recent year-end tournament winner from local scenes that get in touch with them. Once again, like last time, it was a well-run event with no noticeable hiccups outside of the usual "it's a tournament over webcam" quirks that are just a part of the experience. If you're someone who's jammed some weeklies or interested in playing a Canadian Highlander tournament but lack a local scene, I highly recommend the Joking events to both new and old tournament players. At the end of my mulling, nostalgia got the better of me. My first real Canadian Highlander deck was a Sans Blue Winota pile that had an incredibly greedy mana base curve and human to non-human ratio, so I got to work updating the deck. Turns out there's been both a lot of good humans and low curve non-humans to run, and with Lorwyn Eclipse legal, I had a couple cards to try from it as well. The list I ended up settling on is in the description below, so feel free to pull that up to follow along for this next part. As mentioned, the deck I brought was 4-color Winota, and my point spread was Mox Emerald, Mana Crypt, Natural Order, and White Plume Adventurer. The idea behind the deck is you're effectively playing Sans Blue aggro, but you have a certain ratio of humans and non-humans alongside a few creature tutors to help with finding Winota, which, with some slight gambling addiction, should find enough humans for us to go over the top and win on the spot. Because of this, the deck runs a lot of low-cost non-humans. I'm not running cards like Spider-Punk or Inti because they're bad Winota hits, such as the cost of the build around, but I am running cards like Frenzied Baloth, Bristly Bill, Scythecat Cub, and Territorial Kavu to bring big stat lines to the non-human creature types. Disruption is key with a deck like this to avoid getting run over or disrupted ourselves. I mentioned Frenzied Baloth already, but Hexing Squelcher was also run as a new way to blank counter magic and be a cheap non-human, and Surak is a good human hit that makes getting hit by removal just a little less backbreaking. We're running cards like Archon of Emeria, Emperor of Bones, Keen-Eyed Curator, Endurance, and Orcish Bowmasters as strong non-humans that disrupt and slow our opponent just long enough to get the win. We've also got some humans that are both good on rate and good Winota flips to fill this role out. Anointed Peacekeeper and Elite Spellbinder fill out our hand attack package of Thoughtseize, Duress, Inquisition of Kozilek, and Dreadfuge, and Opposition Agent can be one of the most back-breaking cards in a combo matchup if resolved. Mai is also an easy way to stop infinite combos and non-creature spell chains. The deck runs a good amount of ramp to get these creatures out fast, using mana dorks like Deathrite Shaman, Delighted Halfling, Birds of Paradise, Ignoble Hierarch, and Badgermole Cub doing double duty as a dork and a way to create 2 non-human creatures. These help ramp into both our 3s and 4s. The deck's points are also heavily invested into artifact fast mana. Both Mox Emerald and Mana Crypt ramp into creatures incredibly fast, and Chrome Mox and Mox Diamond fill out the package. The deck runs ideally just enough removal to get key cards out of the way, some creature tutors to both find the right answer at the right time and the right threats, and then we're playing Monster Mash. This deck runs 46 creatures and is filled with powerful humans and non-humans. I mentioned a few non-humans before, but for humans, we're running cards like Boromir, our good initiative creatures, the Miracle Humans in Triumph of St. Catherine and Metamorphosis Fanatic, both findable off Worldly Tutor. Joshua filters cards and pushes late game reach, Lightning and Saskia are truly insane Winota hits, and Headliner Scarlet is another insane Winota hit. It's just a really cool strategy to have to build a deck that functions well without Winota, and simultaneously has the cards to push wins with only 3 activations. 2 is fine, but likely isn't enough to win the game on the spot. For example, Voice of Victory is a low mana value human with no ETB, but its Grand Arbiter impression combined with Mobilize 2 makes it just good enough to get in. I'd say the most out there hit is Boomy Unleashed, as you really do not want to play him from hand, but it's a solid effect off Winota that I wanted to try. And of course, Torsten. We're on Natural Order, and in a Monster Mash deck like this, Torsten does a fine Attracts impression as both a Natural Order target and Winota hit. Unfortunately, even worse than Boomy to draw. Finally, non-humans that make more non-humans. We're trying to get as many spins at the slots as we can without compromising our deck integrity. For this, Ocelot Pride is a solid turn 1 must answer for some decks. Squee Dubious Monarch's Token is a non-bow with Winota the turn it comes out, but the escape ability is so good I decided to run it as my Rabble Master. Finally, Springheart Nantuko at worst creates a creature off of each land drop, or can copy whatever it's bestowed upon, which can just end games on the spot. My mana base was pretty standard, just trying to maximize hitting the right percentage of colors. My two notable includes were Gemstone Caverns, which I think is a worthwhile piece of fast mana to run, and Abundant Countryside, new from Lorwyn Eclipsed. I love this card for the deck. It's Ancient Ziggurat that taps for colorless and technically can create creatures late game if you have nothing else to do. After modernizing the list, I will say I think it has gotten a lot better, both the options and my deck building. You can really cut down on a lot of the more cute options and just run a solid list. Plus, my old rant video seemed to have worked because we now have a lot more cheap and powerful non-humans, which makes the deck building easier and more worth it. Alright, so now that you have an idea of what the deck is about, let's get into the games.
You shouldn't talk to me in front of the school bullies.
Why? Afraid I'll get black and blue?
Round 1 was up against Dimir Tempo, and man, this was the get the jitters out round. Amazing to think how much better I'd do if I actually practiced. Turn 1, my opponent goes Deathrite Shaman, so I decide to play Birds of Paradise over my own Deathrite Shaman because his Deathrite Shaman would be able to tap for mana first. This immediately got punished by a Snuff Out onto my birds and a turn 2 back to basics into turn 3 Kaido. Turns out my 4-color deck, on the draw, with a turn 1 Mana Dork destroyed, does not enjoy back to basics. I definitely misplayed hard in my turns while trying to dig out of this. I really should have used Duress before playing out my Territorial Kavu, which got immediately countered. My logic in the moment was that I didn't want to tap all my lands forever, but not only was having only bad lands untapped effectively the same, I really just needed to do everything in my power to get something to stick. So, yeah, terrible decision, which immediately caused it to eat a Spell Snare, which felt pretty awful. From there, the beatdown from Kaido and Ledger Shredder becomes too much for me, and I lose game 1. Now that I knew what my opponent was on for game 2, I kept a hand that went threat, 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 and hoped I ran them out of interaction. I go turn 2 Malevolent Rumble, finding Scythecat Cub, yet another threat, into Miracle Triumph of St. Catherine, which eats a counterspell. My opponent fetches Surveil into Baleful Strix, which delays using Caves of Chaos Adventure. I really don't want my opponent to be able to immediately swing and take initiative, so instead I run out Screaming Nemesis, which trades with Strix and keeps my opponent from gaining life. Playing out my 4th land that I drew, I play Cub and pass. My opponent plays land for turn, and it's back to me. I run out Saskia, which actually sticks, and my opponent flashes in Orcish Bowmasters to ping and block Cub with the Orc army, and flashes in Fairy Mastermind at my end step. On my turn, I make a somewhat questionable call. My opponent activates Fairy Mastermind, and in response, I Fatal Push it over the Bowmasters. Now, I think it was probably better to destroy the Bowmasters to prevent the army and potentially force a Bowmaster's block here, but I also want to take away his ability to amass orcs whenever he wanted and dig for more answers. I get Chumped Block again, and with Flyers finally clear, I slam Caves of Chaos Adventure and take the initiative. My opponent chains some draw spells together and slams Psychic Frog. Oh boy. This single card can turn the game in his favor if I don't find an answer. So instead of going to Forge on my upkeep, I go into Lost Well to scry and run out Joshua. I need an answer to Psychic Frog. I find it. Prismatic Ending. Frog is exiled, my opponent plays Lazav, I run out Bowmasters, they concede, and we're on to game 3. Another close game at first glance, but my misplays really pushed me out of this one. Yet again, I kept a pretty middling hand with Torsten in it, so effectively a 6. I run out turn 1 Deathrite into turn 2 Keen-Eyed Curator. My opponent plays turn 2 Lazav into turn 3 Inquisition and takes my Bowmasters and then slams Psychic Frog. I'm in the same situation I was last game, so I run out and immediately crack Horizon Canopy to try and find an answer. Guess what's on top? That's right, Triumph of St. Catherine. Awesome. For a bit, the game becomes a race between me running out threats and Psychic Frog closing in. I continue to eat removal spells, and one turn late, I remember I have a Karakas. Had I realized this and gained life off Shaman earlier, I could have hardcast my Triumph of St. Catherine in a safer situation. Instead, I can only player out the turn I lose the game from Beats. Round 1 is a loss in 3, but the jitters are out. Let's move on to the next one.
Who is that? Adian smiled. Ronan.
So the thing about this matchup is you really need a few answers, and I did not find enough. Game 1, my opponent takes a Mole 2-5. I have a turn 2 Seasoned Engineer off Gemstone Caverns and Deathrite Shaman. Pretty good, I think to myself. But did I make sure to keep an answer? Well, no. My opponent proceeds to turn 2 Shuko into turn 3 Eldritch Evolution, finding Nadu, into a Nadu trigger, finding Land, Mother of Runes, and Ocelot Pride. Alright, they're built up. I go into Forge for a questionable reason. I really need removal here, I don't know what I was thinking. Swing in with Seasoned Engineer and reveal Solitude off the top I could have drawn if I scryed. Oh my god. This was embarrassing to watch in the replay. I do have the Abrade for Shuko, but Nadu still lives, and my opponent gets to untap with Mother of Runes. My opponent then swings with Nadu, taking the initiative, bestows Springheart and Nantuko onto Nadu, and Court of Callings for 1, finding Nomad's End Core. From here, my opponent is able to do the Nadu line until they find a win with Infinite Devoted Druid Mana and Walking Ballista. All because I didn't venture into Lostwell. Holy misplay. Game 2 was a much more aggressive start for me. I get Mana Crypt into turn 1 Broadside Bombardiers, threatening basically anything my opponent could run out. My opponent responds with turn 2 Badgermole Cub and no second land. I respond with Mawloc fighting Badgermole Cub and another swing from Bombardiers. My opponent does find a second land, a Surveil land, and unfortunately for them, I slam in hardcast Triumph of St. Catherine, sacrifice it to Bombardiers to dome my opponent for 7, and take Game 2. Game 3 was eerily similar to Game 1. I turn 1 dash Ragavan to ramp with treasure, while my opponent goes turn 1 birds into turn 2 another bird, Nadu. Here we go again. Do I have the answer? Well, I have a Duress. If he needs a tutor to resolve, I can slow things down by ripping it out of his hand. I cast Duress, immediately see Nomad's End Core, and know I am doomed. My opponent untaps, starts the Nadu Conveyor Belt, finds Springheart and Nantuko, ephemerates Nadu to reset everything, and is able to combo off by playing and sacrificing Devoted Druid to itself with Agatha's Soul Cauldron in hand and Court of Calling for Walking Ballista to close out the game. Some heartbreaking misplays in Game 1 and some trap hands kept in Game 3 really pushed me out of this round. But we must continue. We still haven't even gotten a chance to spin the wheel with Winota.
Everyone, stop firing! We're sitting on our own men!
Oh cool, I'm playing against a deck I have experience with. Game 1, I turn 1 Dreadfuse taking Mox Emerald and see my opponent has the One Ring in hand, so it's a bit of a race. I proceed to race by doing nothing on turn 2 and turn 3 slam Squee Dubious Monarch and swing in. My opponent plays turn 3 Crucible of Worlds and I play turn 4 Winota, swinging in, finding Boromir and Boomy Unleashed. My opponent takes 12 down to 4 and Boomy triggers, untapping my lands and giving an additional combat step with my land creatures, hitting for exactly lethal. That ripping of Mox Emerald was very important that game, or else my opponent would have been able to play the One Ring this same turn. In Game 2, I just don't quite get enough to lock things down. I have a turn 1 Mox Ignoble Hierarch start and immediately go on the Hierarch beats while holding a Boseiju Who Endures in hand. My opponent runs out Retreat to Hagra, I flash in Bowmasters, and on the turn after, I slam Archon of Emeria. Great, this will slow them down. But it doesn't do a lot of good if I can't finish the job. Retreat to Hagra put in a ton of work for my opponent this game, keeping their life total stable as I tried to shut the door on them with swings for 4 each turn. At the end of my turn 5, my opponent plays Gifts Ungiven, finding the combo pile. I give them Crucible and Zurin Orb, they run out Crucible, I swing in for 4, my opponent goes to copy Fastball with Shifting Woodlands, and in response I Boseiju the Woodlands, stopping them for another turn, and they run out Zurin Orb. The walls are closing in, so I run out Anointed Peacekeeper and unfortunately see they have removal in hand. I name Zurin Orb so they at least have to make a choice. They get lost Anointed Peacekeeper at end step, replay and fire up Shifting Woodlands, copying Fastball, and with the infinite combo assembled, I lose Game 2. Game 3, I get a turn 1 Frenzied Baloth off a Mox start, which immediately takes Glacial Chasm out of the picture as an effective way to stop me. I go on the beatdown and slam turn 2 Anointed Peacekeeper, and thank goodness I did, because my opponent has Toxic Deluge, which I immediately name with Peacekeeper to make it cost 5 mana. My opponent Planar Genesises to ramp, and I slam turn 3 Seasoned Dungeoner. With my opponent at 7, not enough removal for all my threats, and Glacial Chasm shut off by Baloth, they concede Game 3, and I win the round 2-1.
Thought they had enough extra cards in their hand and their deck. Let's just kill you all over again.
Alright, Esper Control. All we have to do is hopefully keep enough threats and get them out fast enough to overwhelm all their removal. Game 1, I slam turn 1 Squee Dubious Monarch off a Mana Crypt. Good start. Unfortunately, Squee immediately eats a Fatal Push. Fair enough, I deserve that. Fortunately, I have follow-up and run out a turn 2 Archon of Emeria, which does its job by making my opponent's turn 2 Scrubland enter tapped. Turn 1 Squee, turn 2 Archon, turn 3 Season Dungeoner. I will admit, my hand, curve, and draws were insane this game. My opponent petty thefts my Dungeoner before combat, but I swing in and replay it, venturing into trap, doming her for 5. With that truly insane hand and curve out from my deck, my opponent concedes game 1. Game 2, I don't have a Mana Crypt hand, so naturally the battle is more uphill for me. My turn 2 Voice of Victory gets damned, my Eladamri's Call gets no moralized, and I follow up with Anointed Peacekeeper, looking at her hand and naming Barrowgoy. My opponent plays Tameo, which eats a Snuff out, and while I get in for 3, I have nothing to do with my mana, and she takes the opportunity to cast Waterlog Teachings, finding Ancestral Recall. On her turn, my opponent casts Recall, drawing 3, and when I go to fetch at end step, she flashes in Opposition Agent. After messaging my list over Discord, my fetch land gets fizzled, and I'm in big trouble. I draw, chip in for 3, run out Ignoble Hierarch, misplay I realized in the moment, should have played it before attacking, and pass. My opponent runs out a Ghost Vacuum, I attack with Peacekeeper, to which she flashes in Weeping Angel. Before blocks are declared, I flash an Endurance to make Weeping Angel no longer a creature so I don't lose my Peacekeeper, and shuffle her graveyard to the bottom. Thinking I might be getting somewhere, I consult the star charts at end step, quickly dashes my hopes. Next turn, removal spell, Bowmasters ping my Hierarch. My board is gone, and my opponent crashes in. I draw, play Mox Emerald, crack my Horizon Canopy, and concede. Alright, back on the play, which means a decent hand here gets us in a good spot. Land, Chrome Mox, Mana Crypt, Ajani. Well, that is good, but I kept a pretty risky hand here. All this fast mana, but not a ton of follow-up. Unfortunately, my opponent has the turn 1 Thoughtseize, revealing basic Swamp, and taking my Eladamri's Call. I swing in and play my top deck Duress. I make a call here. My options are either Ponder or 3 steps ahead. She currently has a Swamp out and a Polluted Delta in hand, so max 1 blue source and only 1 more land total. I decide to take Ponder here to deny her the ability to dig deeper for additional lands and just play around the 3 steps if it ends up mattering. Plus, the one Sheeton in her hand is currently stranded. I draw, swing in with Ajani and friend, and play out my top decked Lightning. I'm currently getting very lucky, and this risky hand might pay off. My opponent does find her 3rd land and passes back to me. I swing in, and she flashes in Wan Shi Tan. Before blockers are declared, I cast Path to Exile, clearing the way for a massive hit, bringing her down to just 1 life. She draws, plays land, and passes. On my turn, my Settle the Wreckage PTSD gets the better of me, and I swing with only Lightning and the Cat Warrior. It ends up working out as my opponent flashes in Solitude, exiling Lightning and trading with the Cat Warrior, flipping Ajani, who immediately makes another Cat Warrior. It's on this turn that Time and Round is called and turns begin. On her turn, she slams in the Abhorrent Oculus I knew about onto the table and Manifest Dread at my upkeep. I swing in with the Cat Warrior and she blocks with the Manifest card. My Luck Sack draws come in clutch once again, as my top decked Fatal Push takes care of Oculus after my cat trades with the Manifest. I create another cat token and pass. It's at this point I want to mention something important. That last card in my hand is a Mawloc I currently cannot cast, as my only red and green source is my Stomping Ground. I really need a red permanent on the field because then I can just threaten burn damage with Ajani, but so far, no luck with my lands. My opponent draws and passes. It is now turn 4. Right now, I can only bring my opponent down to 2, and if I can't win this turn, the game ends in a draw. I draw, I swing in with the Cat Warrior. She flashes in Dress down to draw, but the hit goes through and brings my opponent to just 2 life. That's when I notice she only has 2 blue sources and 1 was just tapped. I play the Boseiju who endures I drew for turn and run out Mawloc, declaring my intent to 0 Ajani. My opponent taps and reveals the 3 steps ahead, and I ask the question, doesn't 3 steps ahead cost double blue? I take the win with Ajani 0 by the skin of my teeth on the last possible turn I had to win. This was a really great match on both ends of the board, and I really wish my audio properly recorded to show you what we sounded like at the end. But we were both pumped about the end of the game when the realization about 3 steps ahead hit. Again, a really awesome match and probably my favorite from the whole event.
Come on! Awesome! Fight against the Sassy.
For the last round of the day, we're slamming face first into yet another control matchup. This time versus Grixis. I land a turn 2 Kenai Curator, my opponent responds with turn 2 Tamiyo, which did not pair well into my turn 3 Karakas. I swing in and bounce Tamiyo before he can attack with her, and slam Screaming Nemesis on my turn. I attack, Tamiyo chumps, and my opponent untaps and wipes my board with Toxic Deluge. I respond by slamming Hexing Squelcher and Anointed Peacekeeper, taxing the one removal spell in his hand, Bitter Triumph. Notably, I see the Shieldred the Apocalypse in hand that has been unable to land due to my Karakas. Next turn, I swing in, my opponent powers up Restless Reef, and I try to snuff it out, forgetting that it becomes a black and blue creature. Leo was very kind and let me put it back to hand. My Anointed Peacekeeper gets eaten in the fray. I play Badger Mole Cub main phase 2 and back to my opponent, who plays a Razorkid Needlehead, which then eats my snuff out as a legal target. From there, I slam Broadside Bombardiers, and my opponent, always kept on the back foot despite the board wipe, concedes game 1. Game 2, I get hit with the turn 1 Ancestral Recall, immediately setting me back. Turns out drawing 3, still good. My turn 1 Ocelot Pride immediately eats a removal spell. My turn 2 Badger Mole Cub does the funny ramp play. This might have been worse than just it having another attacker. And my Inquisition of Kozilek gets Force of Negation. I untap and dash in Deathgreeter's Champion, to which my opponent Snapcasters, flashing back Ancestral Recall. 1 recall is bad enough, 2 is just brutal. But if I can keep the Deathgreeter's train going, I might have this. Then my opponent's The One Ring hits the field, so I run out Cankerbloom and dash Deathgreeters to put a counter on it. Cankerbloom unfortunately eats a Lightning Bolt, and I immediately get Blood Mooned, but thanks to my fetching of Plains and Mox Diamond, I'm in a good spot. Plus, Deathgreeter's Champion is a red card and immediately hits the field. Seeing the impending damage, Leo reveals his 6-land hand and concedes the game and match. Shout out to Leo, he's on YouTube as Leo Plays Legacy, which, if you can tell by his handle, has Legacy Grixis content, but in his words, Legacy has made him sad recently, so he's been playing some other formats like Canadian Highlander as well. If you like Eternal format gameplay involving Grixis, he's your guy, and I hope to see more content from him in the future. Link to his channel down below. I finish with a 3-2 record. If I'm lucky, this might squeak me into top 8. I wait for the results, and yeah, I got 13th place. Losing my first 2 rounds basically completely knocked me out of the top from then on, and even if I went 3-2 in a different way, the top 8 had enough 3-1-1s to fill up the rest of it. But hey, for not playing in a hot minute and not playing Winota for even longer, I was pretty happy with my result. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.